Peace, everyone. Welcome back to Space Invaders TV here on YouTube. Today is Thursday, August the 19th, 2021. Peace and blessings to all of you. And today, as you guys see in the title, we're going to talk about the troops leaving Afghanistan. Some say they're fleeing, some say, but it's an agreement. And before we go in, I just want to start by, we're going to go back and do a whole history, because it's been 20 years, since they've been in Afghanistan. And it all stemmed from the 9/11 attacks. And when the U.S. went over and were going and chasing down Osama bin Laden, they believed that, at the time, it was Al Qaeda was harboring him. So they believed and they knew that he was there in Afghanistan, and that's what ultimately led to the U.S. being there. And within that, the Taliban and everything, they were like running the people. And so it seemed, and I'm just giving a brief little breakdown a little bit, but we're gonna go into the whole history of it as we go on in this segment here. And so the U.S. ultimately the U.S. was led to Afghanistan due to them going after Osama bin Laden, and that was that. And then was other, and then when they seen the layout and how things were in that country, the U.S. was kind of they kind of had to stay, and try to help their troops in Afghanistan become stronger and to be able to stand on their own, and that went through them training up the troops and how to defend themselves against the Taliban and Al Qaeda, what have you, but then so now you have people on opposite sides feeling like United States went there and went to Afghanistan and made the situations worse for the people in Afghanistan. And and then on the US side you have ones that are like, hey, we spent a lot of money and we tried and did all we could do, and it's time for you to just go back and standing on your own. The U.S. it's like, hey, we gotta pull out at some time. And as you had Biden say yesterday or whatever on Wednesday, no time would have been a good time. But we got to, it's like you have to start somewhere. We have to pull out. We've been here too long, Some people may look at it as like, oh, United States went there with their colonialism ways and all of that. I wouldn't, I mean, me personally, yeah, at the beginning you kind of could have thought, like, it was that colonialism mind state and behavior at first. When you look at who was in charge of the U.S. then at that time, like who was the chief and commander for the U.S. at then, was that the Bush, so you Junior, whatever, so you could kind of, it was a lot of thoughts flying around then, and then even thinking that he let me get everything. Let me get my brain straight before I go in with this right here. You would think like with Bush Jr. like he was trying to, you know, going into the Arab countries, you would think he was trying to pick up where his father left off at with, you know, with Saddam Hussein and all of that situation there. So yeah, you could kind of think at the beginning of, you know, when everything went down, because the U.S. actually, 9/11 was in September of, you know, 2001. So the U.S. troops didn't go into Afghanistan till the following month in October of 2001. And you could kind of think of maybe felt that the colonialism thought. But I think as time went on and then we had new presidents come in, I think it was a neo-colonialism type of thought, you know, that went in the process. It wasn't so much we're trying to come in and take over. I believe with the change of presidents for the U.S., I believe that it changed to a neo-colonialism thought. You know, like, hey, we here, we trying to help you. We not here to take over your land. You know, let's be clear of that. We here to help you. Let's help you strengthen up your troops. Because for the beginning, they were in there. It's like U.S. was like, hey, we bombing everything. You came over and you did this to our country. Now, you really, you know, you really tried us. You really got us. We coming in. And so I think at the beginning, yeah, you could kind of think that. But as I said, when, you know, when the change in the presidency for the United States come in, the idea was more of, okay, let's get some things straight here, and let's get some boundaries here. Like, we're here to help you. We're not here to do that. We're here to help you, and that's just it. But as Forbes, I was reading Forbes yesterday. Well, actually, I'm sorry, not yesterday. It was August the 16th, 2021. Forbes put out an article, and it reads, the war in Afghanistan cost America $300 million per day for 20 years. And so they tallied that up, 300 million a day, per day, for 20 years. They tallied that up to be $2 trillion spent. So the $2 trillion spent on the war in Afghanistan, and they broke it down to 300 million per day. They even broke it down so much so that they said, or you could break it down even more to just saying 50,000 for each of Afghanistan's 40 million people. You know what I mean? So that's how Forbes broke that down, and as they say, in baser terms. They saying what Uncle Sam spent, but that was actually taxpayers' dollars. And they go on to say that Uncle Sam has spent more keeping the Taliban at bay than the net worths of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates, and the 30th richest billionaires combined in America. You know, and then we know with war comes, it's a big cost. And yeah, some people are saying at this time that the Taliban has, you know, United States has lost that war. You know, is a war. I mean, I don't call it a war. You know, a lot of lives were lost on both sides. A lot of money was spent. And with war, we know comes money, you know. And speaking on that, we got inflation on a lot of things. Because when you think about before 9/11, you know, we traveled. you didn't have to. If you traveled out the country, it was an option to get a passport. You didn't have to have it. You just had to have the ID of which state you came from. When you leaving United States going out of the country, you didn't really have to have a passport. All you had to do is have your ID, have your birth certificate, and I think you had to have and your social as well. You had to have those three things before 9/11. That's how you travel. We didn't have to pretty much get almost strip searched to board the plane. It wasn't, everyone weren't so on the edge when you got on the plane. The cost of fuel, the gas was cheaper. The cost of goods were cheaper, if you can remember. And this is also a history lesson for the youngsters as well right now. So with war, you know, like I said, comes a heavy price tag. And as they say in Forbes here, as they broke it down, 300 million per day was spent for 20 years, which equaled out to $2 trillion for 20 years. You know, with war comes a heavy price tag, and we as American people, we felt that. You know, and you know, so I have my feelings about, yeah, I also feel, so you have folks in Afghanistan and other people around on both sides are like, hey, you know, it's time to pull out. I feel like my feeling when everything was going down then, I was like, okay, if we're going in to get Osama bin Laden or whatever, you know, the United States believes, if he was the culprit, then okay, they should have got in and got out. You know, we shouldn't have sat there. You know, we shouldn't have sat there, because again, we have to think about, these folks have been going at it over there for years. And when you step on someone else's soil, in that capacity, you step on someone else's soil and you hanging around too long, and you already going over there and you going to grab up someone that most may look at, and maybe most had praised him or something, I don't know. But you going over there to Afghanistan and you stepping on that soil and you hanging around too long, it's gonna be issues. And I feel like you fell into a rabbit hole, and that's what it was for 20 years. You were in a rabbit hole, you know, and just keep going deeper and deeper. It is what is the end goal here? So to everything, it has to be an end goal. What's the end goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? Okay, so we missed because we came and succeeded in our accomplishment. We got Osama. We should have been gone. There was no need to hang around. For whatever reason, they wanted to stay. Okay, if you wanted to stay and help and equip and build them, okay, but it should have really had been a real timeline on that. Like, hey, we're going 5 years, and we got to go. But the United States hung around a lot longer than expected, and most feel that they caused more problems and more issues within Afghanistan. More lives were lost, and some felt like it made it worse for them, and then some looked at it as the troops were there, United States were there, they felt a form of comfortability. They got comfortable. They felt secure that the United States was there. They had a military that was more equipped. So they got comfortable, but they had to understand that the United States military is just that. The United States military. They can't police your thing like when you have a military. So the best thing I guess they thought and looked at was more ethical was to help train the troops. And I think that mentality, as I said, and then what started off as being when the troops may have first came over there under the Bush administration, it could have been that colonialism thought, mindset, or a whole attitude. But once presidents changed for the United States, I think the neo-colonialism idea was presented. Like, no, we're not here to take over. We're here to help you. And then that's what ultimately happened. And then it's like, okay, now we helped you. We have to step back now. We have to get back to our business. We have to regroup ourselves. We have to get our things back in order because we spent 2 decades over here. You know, so I don't look at it as a war. I look at it as it was a lot of time lost. That was a heavy security bill. That's all I'm saying. So moving on here. So when they go in and they talk about the casualties, they said it was 2,500 in Forbes. So I'm still on Forbes right now. They said it was 2,500 U.S. military deaths in Afghanistan, and nearly 4,000 more U.S. civilian contractors were killed. 69,000 Afghan military police, 47 civilians killed, 69,000 Afghan military police, 47,000 civilians killed, plus 51,000 dead opposition fighters. The cost so far to care for 20,000 U.S. casualties have been $300 billion, with another $500 billion or so expected to come. That's a heavy ticket, man. That's a heavy ticket, man. I'm gonna move on, and we gonna go to Al Jazeera News. And anytime I'm reading about the Middle East or anything like that, I like to Al Jazeera. It's always good to whatever part of the world that you're looking up and want to get information on. It's always best to go and look at their main publication for that region or whatever, or country or whatever, because you're gonna get a more in-depth information than what we may get from our news stations here. You know, it's best of all. We listen to our news. They're gonna tell us what they. But you read it get it from the sources and the people who are boots on the ground every day. They live this life. You're gonna get a different perspective. So I like to anything with the Middle East. I don't care where I'm at. If it's Asia, if it's I don't care what. I'm gonna go to the sources there and get a more in depth. So we're gonna jump in, and some people probably know get an understanding of what exactly the Taliban was. So I'm in Al Jazeera here, and I'm gonna give you what the Taliban is. The Taliban, which means students in Pashto language, is trying to protect a more moderate image this time around. But observers in Afghanistan and internationally remain skeptical. On Tuesday, spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid promised to protect women's rights and press freedom in the first news conference since the takeover. In the beginning, so I'm gonna give you the breakdown in the beginning of who and what the Taliban, is, because sometimes some people probably know you probably thought Taliban is Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda is the Taliban. Like, it was two different. So, the beginning. Many leaders of the Taliban, prior to the formation of the armed group in early 1990s, fought alongside Afghanistan Mujahideen against the Soviet occupation in the 1980s. Mujahideen received weapons and money from the U.S. as part of its policy against its Cold War foes. Now, let me stop right there for a minute. The U.S. is one of the top suppliers in arms and weapons around the globe. They supply to many countries. So that's not even unheard of. There's a list of countries that the U.S. supplies arms to. There's a whole list. Even fighter jets. Even maybe some of the fighter jets that they don't use, the U.S. will sell some of those off. You know what I mean? So that's not unheard of. You know. So let me move on. At that time, the Soviets were backing the communist leaders who had staged a bloody coup against the nation's first president, Mohammed Daoud Khan, in 1978. Okay? The Taliban armed group emerged as a substantial player in the early 1990s. Many of its members had studied in conservative religious schools in Afghanistan and across the border in Pakistan. They made quick military gains, winning control of Kandahar, the biggest city after Kabul, and promising to make the city safe. After years of war, people generally welcomed them, fed up with Mujahideen commanders and their forces, who were accused of rights abuses and war crimes in their struggle for power. By 1996, the Taliban seized the capital and hanged the nation's last communist president, Najibullah Ahmadi, in a public square. It declared Afghanistan an Islamic emirate and started imposing its ultra-strict interpretation of Islamic law. So I'm going to stop right there for a minute. So learning that, it was like, man, I almost, it almost seemed, that right there, that behavior, that whole thing right there almost seemed parallel to what SARS was doing in Nigeria. If you remember the SARS situation in Nigeria just late last year, early this year, and but it's been going on, but really became real national news when things just hit ahead, and the people in Nigeria, they were up in arms protesting heavily because SARS was a special SARS SARS is a special anti-robbery squad, and they were supposed to. That's what they were. They were a special anti-robbery squad. They were there to stop all of the mayhem from opposed robbers. You know, but what SARS was doing was they kind of like turned on the people, and when they were supposed to be protecting the people, it was like SARS started doing the robbing. They were supposed to protect the people, and they started robbing the people. You know, they started stealing from the people. Citizens walking down the road, they're pulling them over. They taking things from them, money, cell phones, beating them, imprisoning them for nothing or whatever. All types of stuff, man. It was like you could just imagine. They were doing what they were supposed to be protecting the people from. They were imposing it on the people. That's what SARS was doing. And so reading that about with the Taliban, and then it seemed like they were a group and it split and then that's when, you know, the mayhem went, and you get that behavior. So we're gonna move down, and we're gonna talk about the 2001, the you know, when the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. So in the 2001 invasion, again, we're still in Al Jazeera. It's a publication that I like to read, and you can get all information when you're talking on the Middle East. Al Jazeera. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan on October the 7th, 2001, after the Taliban refused to hand over Al-Qaeda's leader, Osama bin Laden, who was hiding in Afghanistan after being initially invaded back to the country by former Mujahideen commander Abdul Rab Rasul Saif. Bin Laden was considered the mastermind behind the deadliest attack on U.S. soil, which was the 9/11 attack. In the lead up to the U.S. invasion, the group had asked the U.S. President George W. Bush administration to provide proof of bin Laden's role in the 9/11 attacks, and later for negotiations with Washington. Bush rejected those negotiations. The Taliban was toppled within a couple of months of the start of a bombing campaign by the U.S. and its allies. A new interim government headed by Hamid Karzai was formed in December of 2001. 3 years later, a new constitution was declared. It took its cues from the reformed constitution of the 1960s, in which women and ethnic minorities were formally granted their rights by the nation's last king, Mohammed Zahir Shah. But by 2006, the toppled Taliban had regrouped and was able to mobilize fighters in its battle against foreign occupiers and its allies. So, stopping right there for a minute. So it was like the U.S. came in. They didn't want to have the peace talks. They didn't want to come to no agreement. They was coming in. Look, we coming to get him. We don't want to talk to y'all. So the Taliban was kind of protecting the Al-Qaeda. And so then when the U.S. had ran over that and just went and got to him, you know, it seems like the Taliban didn't like that. They got mad. They went up in arms, and then that's when they just start. The Taliban was mad at everybody and started ripping through Afghanistan and causing mayhem, and then they were going back and forth with the U.S. Troops. But if I just remember that whole situation with when everything went down with 9/11. I remember them going after Osama bin Laden, and just remembering that whole situation and how he was caught up in a bunker in the mountains there in Afghanistan and everything. And it was something, man. If you can remember that, you know. And I remember just watching CNN then at that time, and we were watching it daily. And yeah, man, that was something, history. That was some more history for the U.S. Like just the attack itself on the country, and the things that led up to it after that. And just watching at the time that it was, at one point it was like a lot of at least the first year, you had a lot of people that were really wanting, you know, people wanting payback from what happened. People lost family members and they wanted payback. And then it turned, and you would see mothers and families on the news pleading to bring their children back from that war. Because then people realized, they said, okay, well, we got Osama. Why are we still over there? You know, so then people were like, we need to get out of there. Let's bring I want my child home. It's like, once the government, you sign up, you on the government's payroll, they own you. You know, you gotta do what they say. This ain't like no other job where you could just walk away from it just because maybe you think one mission is over. you could just walk away from it. It's not gonna happen. You signed on the dotted line, and it's like you gotta own up to what you signed off for with Uncle Sam. Okay, so moving on, we're still on Al Jazeera. A devastated nation. 20 years of conflict devastated Afghanistan with more than 40,000 civilians killed in attacks by both the Taliban and the U.S.-led forces. At least 64,000 Afghan military and police and more than 3,500 international soldiers were killed. The U.S. has spent almost $1 trillion on the war and reconstructed projects, but the country still remains poor and fractured and tatters. In 2011, the Obama administration allowed a group of Taliban officials to move to Qatar, where they would be charged with laying the groundwork for face-to-face negotiations with government of then-President Karzai. In 2013, the Taliban Doha office was formally opened. In 2018, the Trump administration began formal direct talks with the group. The Afghanistan government was not invited. The head of the Taliban political office in Doha, Abdul Ghani Bardar, signed an agreement with the U.S. on February 29, 2020 that paved way for the withdrawal of the U.S. and foreign forces. The Taliban promised not to attack U.S.-led foreign forces. The agreement also launched peace talks between the Taliban Afghan leadership and the Qatari capital. But the Taliban continued its military offensive on the ground while participating in talks. Last Sunday, they entered the presidential palace, retaking Afghanistan 20 years after they were driven out of power. So now what we have here is then you have articles, and now they saying, oh, you have some articles that's trying to portray it like, oh, they're running the U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. Oh, the U.S. troops are just leaving. Now the Taliban is taking over, and they're doing. But it was an agreement, and then therefore that's what the American troops, you see that they're leaving. There's nothing. They're not being fired on or anything because it was an agreement. We're gonna leave, and they agreed to keep the peace in the country. Now, if that is to be seen, that is to be seen. All you can know and hope is that there was an agreement signed, and hopes that, okay, the Taliban was already upset, and Al Qaeda and everybody, that the U.S. come in bogarting, and they came in, got one of their leaders, took him out, killed him, So they start ripping and running wild anyway, but they were losing to they can't beat the U.S. They couldn't beat the military forces, so they had to back down. So the U.S. troops backed them down. For 20 years, they had them in the headlock. So now they're like, okay. And I believe they get it. I don't think they want to see the U.S. troops back over there again, because if it got to that again, yeah, the U.S. pulling out, but they'll ultimately come back if it got. I believe they will go back, because if the allies were to go back, then the U.S. allies will go back, then the U.S. will probably ultimately go back as well, And I would think just on some business, because we got to remember, this is a business at the end of the day, where we have meetings, you know what I'm saying? Like when in society here, in the workforce, you have meetings, you have sit downs. Ain't no like in the business world, and there's no guns being pulled out that when you go sit down, when CEOs sit down and talk, or whatever, there's no guns being pulled out. There may be heated discussions. Someone may pull out of an agreement, and that'll be it. And you might see a headline about such and such, such and such is not doing business anymore. Ill feelings. But when it comes to countries, there are sit downs and talks, And after them talks, sometimes if they don't go right, the guns get pulled out. And if that ain't gangster, I don't know what's gangster. You know what I mean? And we can all know about the countries that's down for that. That's on that. And the United States is one of them. Okay. Russia is another one. North and South Korea is another one. Who else I'm forgetting about? And the Arab nations, they about that life. You know what I'm saying? So we know off top, because guess what? Those same places I just named, they all been about that action over the past 20-some years. You've been hearing it. If no other time, you've been really hearing it about that action, man. It been heated talks back and forth. For those this one don't like that one, or this, that, and the third, or North and South Korea go at it. You know what I mean? They standing and looking right at each other, right over a line just separates them. The troops stand on one side, this side. They stare at each other. They bout that action. You spit over this line, it's going down. So it's different when countries show. But I ultimately believe that, the people feel like, oh, the U.S. troops came there and messed their country, made things worse for them. The Taliban, they probably felt like, they felt like, hey, man, we was running this. Y'all come up in here and try to, and then they already had division within their party, as we read. But I just feel like it's so much tension and deep-rooted issues there, and a lot of the issues, when you read up on the Middle East, a lot of times it's got to do with its principles and faith. Like, it's like, hey man, like, I'm ready to roll for this, and this principle, you did this, or you supposed to do this, or y'all doing this wrong, we ready to ride. In lame terms, that's just how it is. It's like, hey, I guess, the way they look at things is business is done different. That's why you hear more. It's like more wars we hear there in the Middle Eastern countries. We may hear more. Like, they sometimes you hear about they protests. It leads to airstrikes. It's like it's on another level. You know what I'm saying? Whereas that here it's bad too. It's bad. It's bad too here as well. But theirs just going a whole nother level. It goes up a few notches. But ultimately, all you can do, you sign an agreement. Hey, the U.S. troops, we're not gonna fire on you. It's like, hey man, we just want y'all to leave, man, so we can run our country. And I think that's just it. No, I don't think the U.S., as I said earlier, I think the U.S. should have got out of there. When they got Osama, they should have got in and got out. But once you stepped on that soil, it was the rabbit hole. You began to go down that rabbit hole because it's so much. And then it's like, okay, we stepped on these folks' soil. We caused all of this. We came over here. Almost with this colonialism ways or whatever, an idea, and we cause more issue for the people of Afghanistan and of this region. We cause more issues here. So it's like, now, okay, we got what we came for, but now we gotta stay. You know what I mean? Because now we figured that, oh, their military is not as strong. They not strong to handle these guys. We can't. So I think it became for the United States at that point too, like it was like a code of ethics, man. And I think it was like, okay, morally, like, hey man, we gotta stay. You know what I mean? Like, we got to stay. And ultimately, it just led to the country fitting a big bill that been talked about for 2 decades. Like, why is it the troops? And it was always talks here and there about pulling the troops out slowly. And then it was talks about they pull them out, and then or talks about pulling out, then it went away like, oh no, we can't. They not ready. We can't just leave them like this. You know what I mean? So I just think that the leaders of the ideas of the different presidents that we had over the 2 decades of this going on in Afghanistan with the troops being over there. I think that with Bush, with Junior, whatever, I think that, let's just say, if it was 2 decades, I don't think he would have pulled. I don't think it would have been the idea to pull him out. You know, let's just say we had a president sitting like that, you know, that can just sit and reign over the country for however long until he passes on. I think, you know, it probably would never. I think we will be permanently, the troops will be permanent there. You know what I'm saying? But when you had different presidents and different ideas and outlooks and can form relationships differently and can set up peace talks, approach those talks differently, I think then you get things like this. You know what I mean? Because I don't think that this was even 10 years ago, the troops probably couldn't come to no agreement whereas they can be able to leave out of there peacefully without being fired on. I mean, that's just my opinion, and me being here being around and being of age and knowing, understanding, and seeing what 9/11 created. I mean, we got to look at the way of life that was. I think we seen, you know, of course, I was born in the 70s or everything, so I can't speak. I can only go off of history and what I've read from before my time, and you know, when you talk about the 50s, the 60s. I mean, going back all the way in history, but just talking about how from the 30s in this country, from the Great Depression, then you coming on up to moving in the Civil Rights era. There were many changes in this country that changed the shape, that changed the way business and changed the way business in the greatest country was ran. You look at those different time stamps, and you will see like the way the countries ran. Those situations, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights era, those things changed the way business were done in this country. So I think ever since you can say the 80s, because then we talk about the crack era, that changed a lot too. But I'm gonna just stop with it in the Civil Rights era and everything like that. The Black Power, the 70s. We haven't seen a change in the country since that time. And then when 9/11 came, you seen a total change. The country was caught off guard. You had people in their backyard training at aviation schools that were responsible for running the planes into the towers. So many lives were lost, and then so many, you know, the people, a lot of people were affected who were even in that area of that, health-wise. You know what I'm saying? People were traumatized that even had to come help from various states around the country, EMT, firefighters, law enforcement from all around the country that jumped in and helped, flew in from all over the country to help in, and I was told even from outside of the country. And so many things had, you know, just on that level, mentally messed up the people, you know, and mentally was a scar on a lot of people you know, that witnessed that seen it. Like, you may have not physically was right there, and because if you was physically there in that area when a tower was hit there, and then, you know, planes crashing, what was that, around the Pennsylvania area, there was a plane going into DC. I mean, the trauma from just reading and then seeing what we saw. So that was that. So the way that we travel changed. The cost of things changed. Does anybody remember? And if you in your late 40s, mid 40s, you know what I'm saying, then you definitely, even if you in your late 30s, mid 30s, you know. So that, like, war brings a heavy price tag. And if you remember, things weren't so high, man. Gas wasn't, the price of gas, we didn't have that problem. You know what I'm saying? Now everyone has become used to it, the price of where it's at now. But shoot, let's be real. Before 9/11, the cost of gas was not $2. Nowhere. It was still, I want to say gas was probably $1.50 a gallon. You know what I'm saying? $1.50 a gallon. At least where I was at. I know different parts of the country sometimes it changes, but I'm just giving you, it was under $2. You know, the cost of everything, the cost of goods, because we know one thing, if anything, if history tell you anything else, when war comes, with war comes a heavy price tag of the war and of everything else. So consumer goods go up. Inflation is inflation. War will cause inflation. So, a lot of things went up. The way of life, a lot of things changed, man, and that was a turning point for this country, man. That was a big turning point for this country, and security wise, this country was really caught off guard and lax, and so then you got the heightened insecurity now. Going through the airports, airfare was cheaper. So you imagine when 9/11 happened, afterwards, you know, the aftermath was the airfare going up, everything, man, you know. So yeah, some people may feel like I said earlier, that the United States, you know, they shouldn't have been there. Then you have those, which is understandable. I understand it, you know, reading different articles from the citizens of that country, of Afghanistan, and they're like, hey, how could you up and leave, and y'all caused all this catastrophe, and now you're just gonna leave? And it's like, then it's on the other hand, it's like, hey, we did all we could do. We came in, we righted our wrongs. If we were wrong, we had to come in and get this guy. But then we seen like, oh, we just can't leave these people like this. They're over here torturing the people, like the citizens. Oh, we got to stay and equip these troops. So that was done, and then it's like, if they're still not equipped, I don't know what you want, but it's like, at the end of the day, that is the United States military. You know, they can't stay and continue to protect your country when they have to get back and do the things that they need to do for their country. You know, well, we may have had different catastrophes happening in our own country and didn't have enough troops here to handle floodings or whatever that were happening, and they needed to get troops in. But we had, you know, so it's like, hey, man, yeah, Katrina happening, you had different things going on, and it's like, hey, man, but we got troops over here, and we got to keep them over there. We got to keep so many here. You know, so it's just, you know, like as Biden said, like, hey, I don't agree with all things, but I mean, just that one line is like, with no good, it would have been no good. It wouldn't have been, no time would have been a good time. But we had to start it somewhere. But I do believe that if things were to get crazily out of hand again, somehow over there, then the U.S. will be back to support the people of Afghanistan. I believe that they spent 20 years over there. So, but I think that everybody, you know, I think for the most part, probably, you know, most people, they probably really did wanted the U.S. out of here. Like, all right, man, y'all could go now. You know what I'm saying? So it might be a sign of relief for most people, and then for others, they just like, hey, no, we not believing them. We not believing that Taliban. They're gonna come back. They're gonna be over here tearing up stuff. They're just saying that once y'all all gone, they're gonna torture the hell out of us. You know what I'm saying? And it's not funny, but that's what they're probably, you know. So then you get the images of them clinging on to the U.S. planes, as you know, they're trying to leave the country, trying to leave Qatar. That you see the people clinging on to the planes, and it's a sad scene, you know, because folks just want to, you know, they just like, we got to go. But then I know I seen images and read things of there were citizens that were able to make it out of the country. I don't know the whole story on that, or how that, you know, come about. How some, I don't know. I can imagine, but I'm not going to dive down that hole. But yeah, I just wanted to stop and talk. As I said, I like to talk about not only local issues, but national and global issues. And that's just something that you just can't bypass. And I want to say blessings to Haiti as well. It just seems like it can never catch a break, man. The people of Haiti, peace and blessings be with you all in Haiti as well. Man, but we often know that this time of the year, almost, it get flooded, always this around this time of the year. Peace and blessings be with the people of Haiti, man. Peace and blessings be with the people of Afghanistan. Peace and blessings be with everyone around the globe, man. It's been wicked times here, man. But peace and blessings to you all. This is Space Invaders TV. I'm your guy, Rashawn. I'll be back next week with new topic. So y'all stay tuned to that. Make sure to share this channel with your friends, family, whatever. We have good conversation here. It's not about tearing people down. It's just straight up good conversation here, good topics here, and it's all about just trying to state and point out facts